And Johan is totally
Your version
practical.
of Officer Johnson might have been too outlandish for the real world.
But I think if there is a third one, it will be great to have him. I think because it's the return of the Nazis on the third one, and you know, the pulp elements would come back, and hopefully Lobster Johnson could make it there. It would make Satan happy.
Next question? Oh, yes, right there.
Whatever they're paying Guillermo del Toro, it's not enough.
Yeah, that's what he said. Every week. No,
Especially when you had to light the troll mark.
yeah. No, lighting this movie was very, very difficult, especially you know, things like the troll market where you're in a practical set. So every light that you see is working as a set light and is working as a practical light. And lighting the New York street, which we built completely, it was a backlot. And in Hungary, there is not specialty cranes for the light, which normally you have a crane that can turn to direct the light. There we have electrical cherry pickers that once they went up in the freezing wind in the winter, you had a Hungarian guy there shivering and becoming infertile for the rest of his life. And turn it to the right and he would do what he could. It was really brutal conditions in shooting the movie because we were the guinea pig in a new studio in Hungary. And we found out a lot of things that worked and a lot of things that didn't work.
Right there.
Couple things. I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Do you feel your legs? Which of the four?
Just real quick aside to Mike. I think the Wendigo character from BPRD is one of the most amazing characters, like heartbreaking characters. Like wondering when he's coming back to BPRD. Totally moved from the film.
He's coming back. Keep your eyes peeled. He may show up in a way that you don't quite recognize him at first, but he'll be back. I mean, John and I both love that character, and Guy Davis did a genius job designing that character. I rewrote some of the Wendigo story when we first did it, but for the most part, that was John and Guy. I wish I could take more credit for it. But.
And when did you guys decide to completely break off the Hellboy movie universe from the comic universe? As far as when did you guys
Well, what was the question again? I haven't been drinking either.
When did you decide to break off the comic universe from the movie universe?
I didn't really decide that. I mean, it was always separate. I mean, as soon as you make a movie, I told Guillermo when I first met him, take these characters and do whatever you want. I actually suggested something that was radically different from the comic. He wanted to make it as much like the comic as he could. And I said, well, I'm comfortable with the changes, and then you're not quite as comfortable with the changes, but little by little you wrap your brain around the fact that it's a different thing. So as soon as he made the movie, it was a different world, and as you can see, as you've just seen, it continues to get more different than the comic book world. So I'm not going to try to in any way make what I'm doing jive with what he's doing. So.
I have a question.
But I think it goes both ways, and Mike has always been very clear. And actually, anything that touches the comic book world or the book world of Hellboy is very strict. That things like the Samaritan or the engraving in the hand is not translated into any of that. But I think the same goes for the video game and the animated features. No?
It is the easiest just to say make up a different version of what I do rather than because you're never going to do a straight translation. There's always going to be differences. So my feeling is, well, the more different it is, the more, the easier it is for people to keep track of, which is which. And, the thing I have to live with is most people will know Hellboy, the film. So even people who know the comic will refer to, when they're talking to me, refer to the Samaritan, and I go, you're mixing it up. But, that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. And I'm sure there's going to be people who will pick up the comic looking for Hellboy, Liz Sherman, love story. And I go, sorry, I was never in there.
Right here.
Hi, for Mike, has the movies influenced how you've written the comics at all, do you think?
The question is, have the movies affected how Mike has written the comics at all?
I I don't think so. It's interesting because with the Golden Army and with what I'm currently doing in Hellboy, there are a lot of parallels, but that's, I think, because when Guillermo and I sat down and came up with the original story, I was already plotting this gigantic epic that I'm kind of halfway through in Hellboy right now. So Golden Army is nothing like an adaptation of what I'm doing, but we hit some of the same, ideas. But I've really tried I've really tried to stick to the vision of Hellboy I had. It took me 5-6 years to figure out what the hell I was doing with Hellboy. Once I figured out what I was doing, I've kind of plotted the whole story. So I'm sticking to the story I came up with.
But when we came up with this, and we were talking about the story, it was coincidental completely that he was going in that direction, and that's the direction we were discussing for the movie.
Well, I think when we came up with the idea for the movie, we started out trying to adapt the Hellboy story, Almost Colossus, and after about 2 or 3 hours, we hit a snag and just said, let's just do fairies instead. You think you must be kind of right in town.
I was, but actually it was the first time we came up with what we pitched to Revolution. It was about 4 titans in the 4 corners of the earth, and Hellboy trying to stop somebody that was trying to awaken them.
But there was an elf, it was an elf
prince.
Yeah, it was an elf prince.
So we went back, and then I called Mike one day, and we came up with all these things that it happened to jive. Mike and I think alike in 90%, and then the 10% we don't think alike.
It's huge difference.
It's huge.
It's like miles apart.
Like a chasm.
Yeah. What was funny is, I went out to his house for 3 days. First day was spent going to used bookstores. Second day was, plotting Hellboy, and then the third day was
Lemonade.
yeah. But on the way to the airport, he said, well, let's go to Revolution and pitch the movie. So, we came up with the story that fast, went into Revolution, and on the drive into Revolution, he said, sooner or later, one of us, no matter how much we tap dance around, one of us is going to have to say elves and fairies. So whichever one of us says it first, the other guy's got to jump in really fast and say, it's not what you're thinking. Because this is pre-Pan's Labyrinth, and, elf and fairy just had a whole different thing.
Well, I remember when the script initially leaked to a bunch of people online, the Tooth Fairy sequence, nobody could really wrap their brain around. They didn't really conceive of how awesomely violent little tooth fairies were going to be. Wasn't it for a while there were a lot of underwater stuff that was going to be?
There was a big sequence in which essentially the elemental, as I said, chased Hellboy through the buildings and then waded through the Brooklyn River.
That's when the elemental sequence was 16 hours long.
16 hours. But I liked it because Abe had to dive and wrap a cable around the elemental, and then Abe hit a couple of gangsters floating in concrete.
I never heard this. That would have been great.
Yeah, it was swimming amongst
that.
that.
Knocked out, and Liz had to cook the East River.
This river.
Which somehow it would have been okay.
Yeah. But I like Abe swimming. I mean,
he's a warm water fish.
Dead gangsters. I like that.
Did you miss swimming in this movie?
There's always Hellboy 3.
Kind of, yeah. It would have been nice to have some underwater stuff. But I also, I don't know, did anyone miss the swimming of Abe?